Coming up on our next installment of America's Hope, going against all the odds and winning. Winning through the power of transcending a message that tells the world you're here to give hope for the simple good. That's on our next installment of America's Hope. Good evening and welcome to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright. Good of you to join us this hour. Wherever you are, I do hope that you and your family are well taking care of each other because you matter. Speaking of the fact that you matter, our youth are very important to us and they matter. What is the state of mind for our young people in America and throughout the world? The World Health Organization reports that more than 2/3 of children around the world have seen or witnessed an act of violence, resulting in trauma and mental health disorders. Now, many children in need of mental health do not receive it, which of course causes the mental health crisis among our youth and teenagers throughout the world to increase at an alarming rate. Now, imagine if you can't get help to those children. Well, what happens then? You see, without the help they need, some of these children will actually fall into depression. They'll be prone to violence, anxiety, and low self-value. And hope for improving their life, well, that seems to be impossible sometimes. Our next guest is all too familiar with what's going on with our youth. And tonight she is talking to us about responding to that alarm, a cry for help from children. Priya Shah is meeting the needs of children right where they are through her own unique story and an art program she calls The Simple Good. Priya, good of you to join us this hour to talk to us about why the arts are an important platform for children to provide them with not an escape, but a way of dealing with their mental health issues and developing hope and faith and love to carry on a successful life. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me how this all began for you when you started reaching out to children to provide them with an emotional outlet for them through art.
Well, yeah, it's been a 11-year journey since I founded the organization and really discovering my own meaning of the simple good within my life and really understand what it means to learn and teach resilience. And a lot of that was inspired by my travels and being able to volunteer all around the world. And that is what actually taught me about hope. I was in a lot of different challenging situations. I worked at orphanages in India and slums in South Africa. I was in Brazil and a lot of different places around the world. And it was really quite incredible to see that how so many children had gone through so much within a short period of time in their lives, and they still had the ability to see beauty in other people and around them and had the skill set to acknowledge it. And that's what I realized really what provided resilience and allowed our kids to see that beauty does exist in the world, good does exist in the world, and therefore there's a reason to live for it. And this really shifted how I thought about myself, the things that I had to go through and overcome in the different challenges and obstacles that a woman of color born with one hand has to deal with. And these challenges aren't different than what we face now, and it's in fact amplified. And through the arts is what we really focus on, is teaching what does the simple good mean to us, and really challenge our kids to find the inherent assets and truth that lives within us in order for us to bring positive activism into the world. And that's what provides us to initiate the coping process and support a lot of the mental health challenges that we have today.
And as a result of that, you're helping so many children look into the mirror and accept who they are and see who they can become. What is that kind of experience when you see a child go through that type of transformation because of the program, the simple good that you're providing? What does that do for you personally?
It's empowering, right? Our kids teach us the world because they see it through a very pure lens. What we teach our kids is that everything that you need to change the world is already within you. right? Simple goods, we're inherently born with that. And for us to move towards that possibility is what really creates us to move within our own possibility and achieve our dreams. And it's a really empowering thing to witness because it really shows that there is hope despite all these negative, things that we're always seeing and hearing about and witnessing. Is really celebrating the good that does exist on the everyday level in order to amplify positivity in a global level. And that is what supports community and allows humanity to develop and thrive together.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you find children and or youth, teenagers, what are they saying to you about their life and how they want to aspire to do more?
It's a lot of the things that we, even as kids, wanted to see all the time and actually still want to see. We want to live in clean environments and peaceful environments. We want to convey kindness and love. We want to be in nature. These are fundamental truths that are connected to all of us. And this is something that our kids amplify all the time as well. And I think the most beautiful part is that not only that do they share what simple good they want to see in the world, but they create an call to action of how they will make that happen. And I think that's a very inspiring reminder to all of us, is that we can do something about the challenges that we face, even in the smallest ways. And these small things are what make an impact for our greater community.
Yeah, and how do you express oneself through art? Because I remember growing up, I always enjoyed art, even if I was trying to do a perspective and draw a skyline. I wasn't that good at it, but the fact that I was able to do it, it just brought something out in me that I hadn't seen before and made me appreciate the artistry that people have. Some of them have this innate ability to be able to draw anything or paint anything. What do you find happens to children when they begin to understand, I really like this art. I like applying it and seeing my own personal expression come out.
Yeah, for us, we start each program saying that being an artist isn't about creating something that is beautiful to everyone. Being an artist is having the courage to create and tell a story about it. And that's what really empowers our kids to just even have the courage to draw something without judgment and create something, because there's a larger purpose to what you create. It creates a truth, it creates hope for others, it creates a connection point to our larger community. And that is why it's so important to create. And, when you give that kind of inspiration and empowerment, kids surprise themselves about what they're able to develop, whether it's a photo, a painting, a drawing. They're like, yeah, I did that, meaning I could do more. And that's the seed that we need to continue to plant to allow our kids to overcome a lot of the challenges that we're facing in the world right now.
Yeah, I love that because you're actually, by doing that and giving a child a chance to expose that inner creativity, it just seems like they really get out of whatever was causing them to have the depression. When that moment happens, do you see a light go on, and then are you able to ignite that spark of creativity and hope for them to aspire to greatness?
Of course, I think that's a human flame that we need to ignite in all of us. When a child is able to successfully achieve something that's received by the larger community and connected to it, it naturally challenges them to see, what else can I do that can make and bring good into the world? That's something that I think is very natural to all of us, and is something that is very unique to our program that needs to be cultivated everywhere. What I say is that we're really trying to build institutional empathy in our education systems so our students can feel heard and seen. And therefore, when they walk into different parts of the world, different neighborhoods, they have the courage to also amplify their voice there as well. And I think that shifts, what you feel like you can and can't do, more to lean more towards, let me do things that are good for others. And therefore, it's good for me too. And I think that's, what we need to literally sit on. It's a very small, simple concept that has a profound effect on how we feel safe in this world.
I love this. I love the fact that you've stopped by America's Hope to give us the simple good nature of you, Priya Shah. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and talk to you more about unpacking your own personal story. You've alluded to some of it, but let's get right down to it when we come back from the break. We'll be back in a moment with America's Hope. We're talking to Priya Shah. Welcome back to America's Hope. So I'm talking to Priya Shah. She is the founder and creator of The Simple Good. And I have to call her a champion of hope. She's a hope activist, and she's helping other people, particularly children, young people, teenagers, learn how to become positive activists themselves through art and discussion, through mindfulness and social, emotional learning. And it's all based on her art programming and public art. Priya, you went through some personal things yourself. Talk to me, please, about your personal journey and the power of your narrative that led you to create this wonderful program called The Simple Good.
Yeah, definitely. So I am from Chicago. I grew up right outside of the city. And I grew up with several different aspects in a lot of different ways that became obstacles in my childhood. I'm a woman in this world. I'm a woman of color, where there weren't that many people that look like me. And I'm also born with one hand. And because of these different characteristics of how I was born into this world, I found a lot of obstacles that I had to face, predominantly with people just telling me no. And what I realized at a very young age was that, you're not born into the world with obstacles. People create them, and therefore they can be overcome. I had to, create these realizations at a very short period of my life, and I got exposed to really unique opportunities around the world, where I volunteered abroad. I worked at Mother Teresa's orphanage. I worked with these really amazing kids, and they were in an orphanage. And what they really taught me was what it meant to learn and teach resilience. They had gone through more than any of us had within a very
Yeah.
short period of time on this earth, and yet they had the ability to see beauty in other people and around them, and had the skill set to acknowledge it. And because of that, they knew good existed in the world. And that's why there was a life worth living. And that really resonated with me and sat with me profoundly, because it made me think about my challenges. What am I complaining about? Why am I so sad? And because what I really needed to focus on was listening to who I was, and not listening to the world telling me who I was not. And that's what really made me realize, hey, I'm an artist. I'm born with this strength. Hey, I have these types of resources around me that can help other people. And in that means, it can make me also move towards my possibility. And it was just such a strong movement that put me on the trajectory of feeling empowered and to overcome a lot of the things that people would close the doors on me for. And that is actually what has led me here today. And I know this is something, and as a life experience, that has made me really passionate about teaching other kids this way of thought and living to also overcome the life challenges that are put in front of them. I'm not the only child that has been oppressed in this way. And if we can create institutions and spaces where our kids can thrive and really understand and realize their simple good to change their world, then I believe that we'll have more peace and just societies everywhere we go. And that's what's led me into this journey.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for the journey that you've had and how you have mastered it, and in an unselfish way, you've turned it around to give back to other youth throughout the world. And did you come up against what other children are coming up against today? If they have something that's perceived as a disability, you find that people, the haters out there, the naysayers will try to, or even the bullies will try to pick on that, what they see as a disability, only to find out that it's really part of your strength, part of who you are. How do you help children understand that if they have some perceived disability?
I think that in general, people don't always understand how they oppress you. It's really just a limitation of thought. Some folks that I'm friends with sometimes will not have the foresight of understanding how I can do something because they've never been exposed to it. And so there's a learning moment there. And the only way that I can provide that is by inherently feeling empowered that I matter in this world. and that my strengths, despite people might not be able to see them immediately, can overcome those doubts, and I serve as an example to our kids. And I hope people in general that our first assumptions are not correct, right? People have the inherent ability to thrive and do beautiful things in this world. And in our program, we show so many examples of how humanity really transcends and does amazing things for all of us that have allowed us to be in this evolution of humanity today. Sometimes we take for granted all these incredible leaders that have really moved the needle in providing good because we're so busy on focusing on the bad. And so let us show these different examples of resilience from humans so that when our children are faced with naysayers or folks that want to limit us, they have a reminder of the folks that still moved forward despite all of that.
So when you're working with the children there in Chicago and wherever you've gone throughout the world, for example, working with the orphans with the Mother Teresa organization, that had to be empowering for you personally.
It was definitely powerful. It made me really realize that no matter where we go in the world, good really does mean the same to all of us. No matter our walks of life, our different experiences, the languages that we speak, good really means the same to all of us. And that is what connects us as human beings. And understanding that notion is what has allowed me to live in so many different types of places, experience so many different beautiful experiences, connect to so many incredible humans. And I believe we can all do that. And that is, that understanding really empowered me to feel safe in this world. A lot of people say, why did you go to all these really vastly different places? Because I know that there's so much strength and wisdom in this world that we can learn from. And because I do believe that good lives within all of us, I am not, my fear around exploring these areas subside. And I think that's something that we should also take away from this is that sometimes we create fear of each other based on the idea that we're not connected, but we actually are. All these small moments of good really do connect all of us. And that is what allows us to create safe and peaceful communities for us to coexist.
So through your program, are you seeing progress on that front where children are becoming more aware of their talent, their gift, and their abilities to excel in life?
Yes, definitely. Our program is based on social emotional learning and mindfulness standards, and our curriculum follows the trauma recovery process. So we're really teaching our kids not only about themselves, but their emotions. When challenges do come up, how do we really understand what's happening within ourselves so that we can make the correct decisions for the most positive outcome? Right? So we're talking about taking a breath when some emotion is lighting up that could trigger something else. These types of self awareness teaching moments that can be taught through the arts really allow our students to make better decisions to have more positive outcomes. And that's what supports avoiding further negative outcomes or negative interactions that can have adverse effects on our mental health. And since the pandemic, we already had a stagnant number of kids that are really struggling with mental health issues and not having resources to support it. You said 2/3 of our kids. Since the pandemic, it's only gotten worse. So, we need interventions such as ours to really stabilize our kids, ground them back into who they are so that as they grow up into our societies, they are really making positive decisions, not only for themselves, but also the rest of us. And by teaching the simple good, by using skill sets like art to express ourselves, we are combating our kids to not progress in this mental health trajectory which we're going and make it move towards a positive, grounded outcome so that they can really serve as global citizens for our world.
Love it, love it, love it. How can people get in touch with the Simple Good?
Yes, you can learn more about our work and stay in touch with us by checking out our website, thesimplegood.org. We're all over social media at at the Simple Good. And we have a lot of different events, activations, programs, not only here in Chicago but across the country. So we're always looking to partner and get support. And obviously, all our programs are subsidized, so donations always are welcome to help bring access to our programs to more kids during this critical time.
Yes, I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I love the organization, the Simple Good, and it would be simply good for all of us watching this to actually take note and actually follow your lead and provide more help. In closing, what's your hope for America?
Love that question. For us to truly be a melting pot by connecting with each other through our meaning of the simple good, we have made some progress and we have still a lot more progress to be done. And I think it can be done by us stepping back and thinking about what does the simple good mean to us and how can I connect that to someone else and really allow us to truly coexist in a peaceful way.
Priya Shah, thank you. Thank you for dropping by and letting us know about the Simple Good. And may good follow you everywhere you go, my friend. Thank you. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and I'm joined now by Melissa Ortiz. She is part of the National Center of Public Policy and leads the Able Americans Project for the center. It's so good to join you today, Melissa. And how are things going for you right now?
Things are good. Able Americans is neck deep in research, so we can make sure we have all our facts right, which means I'm sitting at my desk a lot these days, but that's okay. I'll be out meeting people soon again, and I'm happy. We're getting settled into the new condo. I'm counting days till the end of the Biden administration, and to quote my friend Dave Ramsey, I'm better than I deserve.
I hear some politics in there, but I know that you're
Yes.
also working in the field of politics to help people, Americans who are disabled and dealing with the ADA, the American Disabilities Act.
Yes.
Tell me what your purpose is in doing this.
My purpose in doing this is to move to a free market, limited government perspective on disability policy. The idea that people can make the best decisions for themselves instead of the government imposing on them how it's going to be. And one of the things that we're undertaking right now is a deep dive on all the federal disability policies. And it's interesting to me how people with disabilities don't understand how the policies work, so they just believe whatever they're told. And they think that there's no way out once they are stuck on the federal dole. And if we could employ the 75, there are 61 million Americans with adults. 75% of them who are work capable are underemployed or unemployed. And we need to stop that because it's a $2.8 billion a month drag on the economy when these people could be self-sufficient wage earning income taxpayers.
You talked about underemployed or unemployed. Why is that?
I think that people are scared that they will lose their Medicaid or their Medicare if they go back to work, and they won't lose it. The government just won't pay for it anymore. They will have to pay their own premiums. And they're really not that expensive once you are on an individual policy under Medicare, Medicaid. It's what I did. So, and people ask me, so you still pay your Medicare premium? I'm like, yes, I do. So that if I ever have to stop working, I will have that safety net in place for what I need. And there's another factor, which is workplace accommodations. A lot of employers, people that can hire, think that it's too expensive. The average workplace accommodation is $500. In some places, clearly it's going to be more expensive, in some places less expensive. And the young under 35 set and wounded warriors are coming out of college with all of the adaptive technology and everything they need to make their workspace accessible. So that takes away an excuse right there. And then for people with disabilities who become employed, they find that the accommodations that some people are willing to make don't work for them, or they find employers who say they'll make accommodations and make none at all. And that discourages them, and it gets old. It's hard.
Yeah, it sounds very hard and very challenging and daunting. And I wanted to ask you a two-pronged question based on things that you just said. One, is there discrimination out there against Americans with disability?
Yes.
And how is that implemented, or how do you see that? Is it because what you're talking about are there some people in corporate America who are discriminating against Americans with disability and not making everything accessible for people who are underemployed or unemployed?
There are, and I think one of the biggest places, as a person who uses a wheelchair, one of the biggest places that I find discrimination is in the bathroom. There are wheelchair accessible stalls. Was a whole plan, a whole architectural guide put in place in 1990 when the ADA was passed, and it's called the ADAG, Americans with Disabilities Act Architectural Guide. And it tells you exactly how to set up a bathroom so that somebody that's in a wheelchair can back in beside the toilet and transfer. What people do is put cabinets or changing tables or things like that in that space because they don't understand why it's there. So there needs to be an education of corporate America. There needs to be, you can't legislate empathy, but I'm a big believer that it's very helpful to put people joke about me putting people through their paces. And I, prior to coming to the National Center, one of the things that I did as a freelancer is I went into companies and I actually caused people to become disabled for the day with a different variety of disabilities. Like I would cover their ears so they couldn't hear. They would have to wear kind of a gag so they couldn't speak clearly, or they wore mittens so they couldn't use their fingers. And some people actually put in chairs and let them roll around and find out what it was about. And once they kind of got their heads wrapped around why it was so important, the next thing, and I had purpose behind that because the next question was, tell me how to fix this so that nobody ever has to go through this. And that's where you can start to have the conversations. Conversations are no good unless they move people to action. Persuasion is no good unless it moves people to action.
And it sounds to me like you're also saying, regardless of your disability, whether it's intellectual or physical, there are things that you can strive to accomplish. And this show is called America's Hope. So being disabled does not extinguish hope,
No.
does it?
No, and hope is a choice. Hope is choosing to believe that everything in the end will work out. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy getting there. There are really hard things that people with disabilities deal with. They may not tell you about them. My boss teases me and says I'm not shy, and I just kind of lay it all out there. One reason I do that is to start conversations and to have people be the approachable person in the room, instead of being the angry person on wheels who repels people with their anger. I try to be gentle is not the right word, meek is not the right word, but I try to be approachable and let people come and ask me all kinds of things. And you might be surprised what people would ask me, but they said, I just feel safe talking to you about this. And so hope is something that you choose. Hope is really surmised in a Teddy Roosevelt quote that's really, really long. So I'll just tell you what the end of it is. And he said, the glory is in getting up every time you fall. And that just means you have to get up every time. And it's one of the hardest things that you'll ever do. But for me, a lot of my hope comes from my faith in the risen Christ and knowing that if he walked the streets with that 30-pound beam on his arms that had been beaten to pulps, and yet he still did that. He did that because he loved me. But I get up every morning, A, because I'm appreciative of the life that he's given me, but B, there are people out there counting on me. There are 61 million Americans with disabilities who are counting on me to get this policy right. My husband counts on me. My friends count on me. I count on me. I have a dachshund who's not a person that thinks she is, who counts on me. And the thing that will give you hope is knowing that you can always try again tomorrow and knowing that there's somebody out there counting on them and you don't want to let them down.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Melissa. Look, I want to take a break for a moment. And when I come back, I would like to talk to you. We've talked to you a little bit about what you do publicly. We'll get back to some of that. But I also want to know what you went through personally. We'll have more of my conversation with Melissa Ortiz in just a moment on America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm continuing now with my conversation with Melissa Ortiz. She is head of the Able Americans Project for the National Center of Policy. Melissa, we were talking about what you do publicly in terms of legislation and looking out for the 61 million Americans that you represent. But what do you go through personally in terms of dealing with your own situation as it's related to being bound to a wheelchair, yet still having the resolve and the hope which you just spoke about to get up every day?
It can be frustrating when I'm trying to get to work and one of the metro elevators isn't working. I knew in 1987 that I was going to live in DC someday, if not my whole life, that someday I would live here because I can travel from my house all the way to Key West in Florida and all the way to Prince Edward Island up north without ever having to get behind the wheel of a car. And since I don't drive for medical reasons, I thought that DC was a pretty great place to live because I could get to work by myself. If the elevator is not working at a station, I have to roll down to the next station down the line and hope it's working there. I am pretty open about my disability and people asking me questions and things like that, but there will come times when people ask me really inappropriate questions or really condescending questions. People will ask me if my husband is my caregiver, and I say, no, we're married, and I show off the beautiful wedding set on my hand, and he shows off his wedding band. And they'll pat on him and say, well, aren't you just noble for taking this on? And he always has to put his arm across me when he does that because I want to snarl and snap and say things that would not be nice. Again, with the marriage thing, I had a cousin who asked me when I got married if I was going to walk down the aisle because I do have some mobility. It's becoming less and less as I age. And we got married in 2002 and I was still reasonably able to walk at that point with crutches. And I looked at her, I said, well, of course I'm coming down the aisle on my crutches. And she said, well, I think it would be better if you just sat on the front row while everybody was coming in and then just stood up.
What?
When
Really?
It was time.
Someone?
Yeah.
So
said,
is that ignorance or insensitivity, or is it a matter of both?
Both. It's both. And an unwillingness to think outside the box of their own perception. So I politely informed her that she didn't have to come to the wedding if it was going to make her uncomfortable. And 5 weeks later, we got married to the triumph of bagpipes. And I walked that aisle because it was important to me to be able to do that. Had I been in need of using a chair full time, I would have just happily gone right down that aisle in my chair. Because I was getting married. I was doing something that everybody else does. I was just doing it a little differently. So that was a real triumph. It was a pretty neat moment to just stand there and realize that after being born 2 months early and not having a detectable heartbeat when I was born, and then having a form of meningitis that's supposed to kill you when I was 9 months old, and I'm clearly still here, them telling my parents I wouldn't graduate from high school. My 40-year high school reunion is a year from now. All these things that they said I would not do. No one told me that I could not do these things. So I did them. When it was time for me to go through cotillion training, my mother went to the director of the program and she said, she's coming and she will be invited. And she's a good Southern mother. The joke is that Jewish mothers tell you can do something and Southern mothers say, you will do something, and they nod their head at you. You must have a Southern mama, so you know.
That's so true.
It is true,
but
it's
so
because of her determination that I live as normal a life and as mainstreamed a life as possible, that I got to do all this stuff.
It's so true. Melissa, I got to ask you a question real quickly.
Sure.
Based on all the things that you just talked about, unpacking your personal life and how this disability developed, and yet your mother's advice, don't you think America is in need of some good old-fashioned motherly advice? Get your act together, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, left, right, conservative, liberal, get it together and start putting on some hope and get up every day.
where do we agree? Once we get there, let's move out to the things that we don't agree on and see where we can come. I'm covering my face here. See where we can come together, and everybody has to be willing to give up something. You can't die on every single hill. That's also a statement I have to tell myself every morning when I am prepared to go butt heads. And there's some people on the left who would happily meet in the middle. And there's some people on the right who would happily meet in the middle. If we could tone down the rhetoric and just decide that we need to get it together more than we need to be correct.
And Melissa, my friend, that is why I wanted you on this program, because it's all about America's hope and hope being our common denominator so that we can work together, all sides working together to form a more perfect union. We ain't there yet. And it takes a process.
It is a process, and it's especially true in disability policy. Neither side of the aisle is getting it right. But when we start having conversations, it starts sounding an awful lot like we're saying the same thing, that we want people with disabilities to be fully enfranchised and fully part of the American fabric and have a seat at the table. The question is, how do we get there in a way that is helpful for everybody? And that's what Able Americans is doing, is making that path.
Absolutely. And so what are the next steps in making that path become more crystal clear, lighting it up and making sure that you're shining a light on it so that the policy actually works and has teeth in it?
The most important thing that we're doing right now is we are doing a deep dive into federal disability programs and looking at where the money's going, where it's not going, where it's supposed to be going, and would it be better if we followed, which I personally think would be better if we followed an idea called money follows the person, so that the person with the disability could determine how they're going to use their Medicaid, Medicare dollars to best care for themselves, get the medical care of their choice, the medical equipment of their choice, instead of being told how they're going to spend that money and told how they're going to live their lives. And until we can get that very specific policy in place, I'm not sure that there is a way forward.
And what you talked about sounds like good common sense policy.
It is.
There's another policy you're concerned with, and you've been very vocal about that, and that's the EV, the electric vehicles and things of that nature. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, with electric vehicles, wheelchairs are the original electric vehicle, electric wheelchairs. And I can tell you that no matter what kind of battery you have in your vehicle, if it gets below a certain temperature outside, that vehicle's not going to run, because batteries are just simply not designed to run in the cold. New York City debuted a whole fleet of electrically powered, battery-powered cabs in the early 1900s when this first became a thing, and it didn't work. Fast forward to people with disabilities. If I drive an electric vehicle, it can't handle the weight of my chair. It can't recharge my chair in the way that a fuel-powered car can. It has to have special tires. And bottom line, let's go back to that 75% of 61 million Americans being underemployed or unemployed. They can't afford it. They can't afford it. And in an effort to put everybody in electric cars, the powers that be are going to create an untenable situation for lower income Americans, whether they're disabled, people of color, no matter what their reason for being lower income is. Even some people of not color, they're going to create a situation where they can't get to work and they can't support themselves because they can't afford to drive their cars.
So what's your message to America in terms of hope? You've talked about the political perspective, how you believe in the Speaker of the House. You're not so much in love with the President of the United States. But what's your message to both of those leaders and all leaders of Congress in terms of moving America forward and understanding and respecting the fact that people with disabilities are living remarkable lives, but they need the help to continue to do that?
The first thing I would say is find somebody who has a disability and get to know them as a human being, as a fellow American, as a fellow human being. Find out what they need. Find out if government's the best way to do it, or if living in community, we can all help each other. There was, when we first moved to DC, we lived in the Bloomingdale community. There was a young woman in that community who was a wheelchair user, and every morning, the men who had known her since she was little bitty in, in her very first wheelchair that looked like something made for a wheelchair Barbie, when it would snow, they would be up at the crack of dawn shoveling her ramp and shoveling the sidewalk to the bus stop so that she could get to school. That's what living in community looks like. They didn't wait for the sanitation department to come and shovel the sidewalks. They got up and did it. For a young man that I know about who's blind, his classmates, he was in a regular classroom because he was found to be of exceptional academic ability. His classmates took turns reading to him. That improved their academic ability.
Wow.
There are ways to do this.
Thank you for your remarkable living, because you are
You always
living.
encourage me. Thank you. I am
thank
living.
you.
I'm not just existing.
Yeah.
And you're not just existing either. You have a life, and that's incredible.
Thank you so much. Melissa Ortiz, right here
Thanks so
on
much,
America's
Kelly.
Hope. Appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you. Have a great day.
You too. God bless. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back. My final word for tonight is to, first of all, thank our guests, Melissa Ortiz and Priya Shah, two incredible women doing extraordinary things to help people wherever they go. And as a result of their work, we are finding that no matter what you're going through in life and no matter what you're facing, there is hope over despair, faith over fear, belief over doubt. And that is the simple good. The good of being ignited and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace, and keeping hope very much alive. Until next time, America, good night. Your America and my America.
United we stand, divided